Welcome to our first series of flipped activities for the Model UN Seminar second semester. To start, I would like to go over the semester concept map, and as you've been told in class, the theme of this semester is why are developing countries still poor? Our first topic will be exploitation by developed countries. And today I would like to focus on the example of food leading to a solution of fair trade. One of the reasons that developing countries are still poor is related to how developed countries are treating them. And I'm using the word exploitation, which has a very strong negative connotation. And to prove my point, I would like to use the example of Japan's food self-sufficiency. The Japanese government has set the 2020 goals for food self-sufficiency at 50%. But if we look at the situation in 2013, we were quite far from the mark at 39% on a calorie supply basis. Besides, if we look at the history of food self-sufficiency in Japan, we have good reasons not to be optimistic. As you can see, the data we have here start in 1980, and clearly the progression is a downward one, meaning that food self-sufficiency has been going down since 1980. Let's look a little more closely at what Japan actually produces and what Japan imports. As may be obvious from the graph, the one food item that Japan produces at a high level is rice, followed by vegetables and seafood. The other food items are at a pretty low level, especially oils and fat. We also have a low level for wheat, and think that every time you eat pasta, this is what pasta is made of, wheat. If you like your meat, Japan only produces 16% of what you eat. Surprisingly, soybeans, and remember that soybeans are used for tofu, are at a pretty low level of 27% as well. And the situation is even, I would say, alarming, even more alarming if you look at the calories we get every day from the food we eat. As I said, rice, we only import a small amount, 3%. But the amount of calories we get from rice is 23%. The highest, true, but then if we look at the other three food items that give us calories in a day, which are meat, oils and fat, and wheat, we are importing those at a very high level. Meat, for instance, is imported at a level of 84%, oils and fat 97%, and wheat 87%. This explains why our food self-sufficiency on a calorie base is so low. So how is Japan doing compared to other rich countries? And here I'm using data from 2010. Well, it's pretty clear. Japan comes last. So it has the worst situation in terms of food self-sufficiency. A question you may have by now is, where does Japan get its food from? From the 2013 report, we see that developing countries and intermediate countries, so for the sake of simplicity right now, to make it simple, let's call these countries poor countries, at least poorer countries, countries which are not as rich as Japan. So these countries are the one providing a lot of the food that Japan requires. By 2050, Japan's dependence on countries not as rich as itself could be as high as 54.5%. Compared with 2000, this would be an increase of 164%. This number actually scares me. But there is an if. We could change the situation if, instead of eating more and more Western style, we went back to more Japanese style. So if trends in eating could go back to more traditional dishes, maybe we could change that situation. In addition, if agriculture becomes a more popular job, meaning that we stop the fact that there are less and less farmers nowadays in Japan, maybe also we could change the situation to something a bit more reasonable. The Japanese government, being aware of its situation regarding food self-sufficiency, it offered in 2009, during the G8 summit, to create investments that would benefit poorer countries and their local communities regarding agriculture. It took a while, about 5 years, for the Committee on World Food Security to put this idea into a principle, a set of principles actually, called Principles for Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems. The principles were approved in October 2014. So let's look at these 10 principles. The first one that catches my attention is the focus on sustainable and inclusive, meaning including everybody, economic development. For me, we can't think of the future without thinking about sustainable development. In addition, I believe that gender equality is another condition for a bright future. The fact that men and women are considered the same, given the same power, the same rights, is something extremely important. The next principle I am really excited about is engage and empower youth. So youth, meaning young people, engagement, that they feel concerned, that they take action. And empowerment here would be giving them the power to do so. And I'm hoping that through the seminar, this is how you will feel engaged and empowered. The other principle I am very happy to see in this document is the concept of respect and conserve, and all of this is related to the environment. So respecting, conserving, protecting the environment. But not just the environment, also respecting cultural heritage and traditional knowledge. I think that too often modern knowledge, technological knowledge, takes over what the past generations have given us to work with. And I will jump to the end and focus on accountability. We will talk quite a bit about corruption, and I believe that if you hold people accountable, meaning if you ask them to show you that they have done what they promised to do or what they're supposed to do, then results are more likely to be positive. So accountability, making sure that you check on what people are doing, is, I believe, a very important principle too. As you may have understood, I'm pretty excited about these principles, but yes, I am sorry, there is a but. They are only soft law instruments. This means that countries and organizations can choose to follow them or not follow them. They are not compulsory, they are voluntary. In addition, even if countries and organizations decide to follow them, they can break the promise they made related to these principles, and they can break their promise without consequences. Nobody will go and tell them you are doing something wrong, you need to follow the principles. So the principles are non-binding. I have a but again, but this time it's a positive one. Because the principles are very new, and because I strongly believe that they could make a real difference, I know that if young people get involved with this principle and they make sure they are properly implemented, meaning people use them the right way and don't just give up when it's easier for them to do so, I truly believe that they could make a big difference. So my message here is that the younger generations have to care and take action to protect their future. Keep in mind that we can all be hummingbirds. And the UN Secretary General's Envoy for Youth, so for the younger ones, said in March 2013 that to unite, so unite means bring together, to unite nations, business, democracy, development, security, peace, and all the other values that should unite nations. It's not the job of the people working in this building. He was giving the speech at the UN. This is not the job of governments. This is not the job of experts. This is the job of everyone. And as we saw last week with the story of the hummingbird by Wangari Maathai, I truly believe that this statement is not just a nice statement, it's a very true statement. We all have to get involved and do something. This is the end of the first part, and I wanted to explain to you the situation regarding Japan's food self-sufficiency. I hope you understand it is not a good situation, and in the next part I will explain the consequences of low food self-sufficiency on poor countries.